I don't think Liam can be here. So we're just waiting on Melissa then? And Steve?
I just spoke with her, so she's coming.
Hi, John.
Peter, is that an accurate number, 36 people?
Yes.
Yes. 11 on our side and 25 attendees.
We have any way of measuring what happens on Granicus?
I don't think so. Be a question probably for the city clerk. Maybe Tom Shevlin would know. I have to remember how to share a few screens side by side.
Peter, is anyone else connected?
What do you mean?
Is anybody up on the screen yet? Any members?
There's
up on-
31 attendees, and we have all the members here except for Liam and Melissa.
Okay.
Madam Chair, how much longer do you want to give Melissa?
Let me just call her. She thought it was at 6:30. She's coming on.
I'll put her on my phone call list.
Yes.
Kim? Hey, Kim, it's Steve.
Yes.
Do we just have board members aboard right now?
So, Peter, will you just explain to him the,
No, this is something else. This is something else.
The public is here, Steve.
The pub, that's all I wanted to know. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
yeah, Steve, do you have a screen that shows shows the board members?
For some reason, in my lower corner, yep, I see you just you right now, whoever's talking. And
If you go to your top right-hand corner, there's,
yeah,
and there should be another option there where it can open up to show everyone who's there.
share content, like, maybe.
It says participants, Steve.
Gotcha.
See it? Up
Yeah,
right
so I
here.
have a whole list of it. How do I,
Yeah, participants is just the list of like attendees and panelists,
right,
I think. So you have speaker view. If it says gallery view, and there's 9 little dots, you click that.
so get rid of the participants, right? Wait, let me go to more, see what they say. Webinar virtual, raise hand, disconnect audio. No, that's not it. Okay, I see me for some reason, but
There you go.
Is Melissa the acting secretary again tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone has his hand raised, Peter.
William Kimes?
Yes.
So I've allowed William Kimes to speak. I've asked William Kimes to unmute.
Why don't we just have him text Peter and let's begin.
All right, Trish, do you want to go through the presentation?
I do. Welcome, everybody. This is the November 5th, 2020 Special Planning Board meeting. I'd like to begin with a presentation of the Planning Board's virtual meeting procedures. This meeting will be held remotely in compliance with Governor Raimondo Executive Order 2025-1A, which reads, such means may include without limitation providing public access through telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing, or any other technology that enables the public to clearly follow the proceedings of the public body while those activities are occurring. Next, please. Note to meeting participants and attendees, please be advised that this online meeting is being recorded. This includes all audio, video, and names. All members of the public who wish to comment during this meeting must correctly identify themselves with name and address before proceeding. Next slide, please. Planning board members, please turn your video on. To prevent echo, mute your microphone when not speaking. Use the space bar to temporarily unmute. Please connect to audio via phone or for redundancy. Do not use phone and computer audio at the same time. Use the raise hand button in the participants panel to be recognized by the chair. At any time, call 401-845-5472 or email pfriedrichs@cityofnewport.com to communicate any issues with the audio or video to the moderator. And please remember to be professional. Next slide, please. Members of the public wishing to speak. When the chair calls for public comment, raise your hand via the participants panel. Those on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. The moderator will promote you so that you can turn your video on when it's your turn to ask your question. You will need to unmute yourself, *6 for those on the phone, and clearly state your name and address. Also, at any time, call 401-845-5472 or email pfriedrichs@cityofnewport.com to communicate any issues with the audio or video to the moderator. And please remember to be respectful. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you. Good evening. This is a meeting of the City of Newport Planning Board. I call the meeting to order. It is now 6:12. Will the secretary please, Melissa, in place of the secretary, please call the roll.
Sure. Kim Salerno,
Here.
Jeff Brooks,
Here.
Liam Barry, Stephen Berlucci,
Here.
Elizabeth Fuerte,
Here.
Richard Haggis,
Here.
Paul Marshall,
Here.
John Oliveira,
Here.
and Melissa Patavina. Here, Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. First on the agenda are the minutes. Will anyone abstain from this vote? Is there a motion to approve the October 22nd, 2020 minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Will the secretary please record the vote? Will the secretary please record the vote?
I forgot that was me. My apologies.
Sorry.
Kim Salerno,
Aye.
Jeff Brooks,
Aye.
Stephen Berlucci,
Aye.
Elizabeth Fuerte,
Aye.
Richard Haggis,
Aye.
Paul Marshall,
Aye.
John Oliveira,
Aye.
Melissa Patavina, aye. The ayes
Thank
have it.
you. Thank you. Next on the agenda are communications, and we have no communications this evening. Next on the agenda after this is business. Welcome again to the second presentation of the North End Urban Plan. To recap the last meeting, the city has developed a strategy for accepting deaccessioned state and federal lands, including the Navy Hospital site and the excess lands from RIDOT's ramp link realignment. Through significant public engagement, this strategy was matured in the 2017 comp plan, and it presented a directive for economic development in the North End that would build upon the city's existing strengths and expand employment opportunities. In the 2017 comp plan, the first economic goal is to develop a robust and diverse economy, providing suitable employment opportunity for residents and a stable tax base. This goal is a broad benefit for taxpayers, as well as a promise for the city's youth. The first related policy is to support primary economic drivers while seeking to attract and grow the technology sector and businesses that represent innovative concepts. Tonight, we will be recording the presentation for future viewing, and this video will be published on the Planning Board webpage as well as the Granicus streaming site. I will give an overview of the process for this evening. First, we will open the public hearing. Then we will have a presentation of the character code by Colin Scarf of Code Studio. Colin is a subcontractor of MBBJ, and he's a specialist in zoning from Austin, Texas. After he speaks, we'll allow the board to question him. And then next, we will display questions that city staff received and from the community, and they created responses. So they'll walk us through the questions and their answers. After that, we will ask staff for any related communications that came in this week regarding the North End Urban Plan. They'll walk us through that, and then we will invite public comment. If time permits, we will introduce some proposed amendments, and then we will continue the hearing till November 18th. November 18th will be our final meeting, and at that point, we will review and take vote on amendments, and those amendments may be on view at the city website so that the public can actually see what we'll be voting on. And then finally, the board will complete its task by forwarding a recommendation to council. So I will now continue the public hearing, and I would like to invite Patricia Reynolds for an initial presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also like to begin with a brief recap of the last session. We began by discussing what led to the creation of the North End Urban Plan. The fact that the North End is disconnected both physically and economically. That with the Pell Bridge ramp realignment, there will be opportunities to reconnect the North End and new land will be available for development. That the 2017 comprehensive plan says that Newporters see the future of the North End commercial area as an opportunity to diversify the city's economy with a focus on innovation. And we also talked about the goal to incorporate the North End Urban Plan into the city's 2017 comp plan in order to make it part of our NBBJ presented the urban plan itself, which is based on the 2017 comprehensive plan, is reflective of the ideas and desires expressed by the community during public outreach, and builds on the themes of opportunity, connectivity, resiliency, equity, and quality. The urban plan looks at the North End commercial area as 6 character sub-districts, all working together as a whole, but with a range of existing building types and land use. These character sub-districts reflect the community's preference for a mix of new uses that are compatible with and supportive of existing businesses. Appendix A helps by providing detailed guidance for each sub-district. This is basically a form-based code, which for now will serve as design guidelines, and as state regulations evolve, may be incorporated as area zoning in the future. Tonight, we'll take a look at Appendix A, the character guidelines. And with that, I'd like to again welcome Alan Mountjoy, the principal in charge, Chris Hurlich, the project manager, and Colin Scarf from Code Studio. Thank you.
Thank you. So next, I'd like to invite Colin Scarf to present the character code.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Hopefully I'm not on mute. Let's see if I
We can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. Welcome. Welcome to my living room, I guess. Still getting used to all this zooming in from various places. So hello everybody, and it's good to talk to you all this evening. So I'm just gonna give you a quick walkthrough of the character guidelines that we've been working on over the last several months. This is attached, as Trish said, as an appendix to the plan. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through the document, kind of at a high level, kind of give you an introduction to it, and then would welcome kind of any questions after I'm done. So this is the table of contents. It kind of looks like a zoning code or a form-based code, I guess, because that's how it started out its life as. It's kind of moved over to become more of a guidance document at this point. So this kind of introductory stuff is very kind of ordinance-like, kind of has, intent statements, and then, when this code might become effective, if it was a code, any kind of conflicting provisions with the existing regulations. So that's kind of the intro piece. And then we have 3 main components to the document. We have the sub-districts, which I believe you guys kind of got introduced to last time. And then we have this idea of these frontage overlays, which are really, I guess, form and I guess like how buildings relate to the street regulations or parameters. And so these kind of go on top of the use districts, and what they do is really help shape the public realm. And then we have the third component, which we sometimes call kind of the site development parameters. So like requirements like parking and landscaping and screening. So these, just to refresh your memory, these are the character sub-districts mapped. The Urban Village 5, Urban Village 3, Business Corridor, Maker Tech, Maker, and the Waterfront Campus. And so these are the frontage overlays that I referred to earlier. And these, like I said, these go on top of the sub-districts. And so what you'll see here is this, the shopping center here has a character district of Urban Village 3, I believe. And then on this side of the street, it's Business Corridor. So they have, these two districts have different underlying rules, but yet they have the same frontage requirements. So we'll get into it in a little bit more detail, but fundamentally, the sub-districts control things like side and rear setbacks, building height, minimum height, building width, so the overall size of buildings, and they also control what uses might be recommended. Whereas the frontage requirements control how close buildings have to be to the street, whether buildings have to have transparency, and things of that nature. So just for this evening's purposes, I've kind of split up the districts into kind of two separate components. The village districts and what I'm calling the non-village districts, so kind of everything else. So the village districts are really something quite different because they're applied to kind of larger pieces of land. And the non-village districts are you know, for the most part, smaller sites. And so what we've tried to do here is create a system for the village districts that when a developer comes in to redevelop these sites, they're going to have to think about providing new blocks and new streets as part of their site plan, which is unlikely to happen in the non-village district because for the most part they front existing streets and are on shallow parcels. So just a reminder, here's the urban village districts here. And so this is just an example of a page from the document of Urban Village 5. And so this is kind of how the regulations look. So every district for the most part is going to have an intent statement that helps someone understand what the district is intended to achieve. So this column here is going to be very specifically just for the urban village districts. So as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have block requirements, you're going to have special street requirements, you're going to have special frontage requirements, and then you're going to have to provide some open space as part of your development. So the right-hand page here is something that would apply to all sub-districts, no matter whether it was an urban village sub-district or not. And so you'll see here some stuff that you're familiar with, lot width requirements, side setbacks, rear setbacks, transition requirements, making sure that if there is adjacent residential development, you're going to have to appropriately transition to that existing development. So building height, minimum height in this particular case is a 2-story minimum height. And then buildings can be no wider than 150 feet in this particular instance. So that's just to kind of maintain the scale of buildings so that they're kind of, you know, pedestrian scaled and not overwhelming. So I'm just going to go back to this blocks and street stuff because it's really important for these urban villages. You'll see here that so you're going to have a block perimeter of 1,600 feet and a maximum block length of 600 feet. And then you're also going to have to provide what we're calling core streets, and I'll show you a little bit later what that looks like. But you're going to have to provide a core street every 1,000 feet. So let me just kind of show you what that might look like. So just to help you understand, what a block perimeter is, in this particular case, it's 4 sides of a block. And so when you come in with your development concept, you're going to have to meet these requirements to a certain extent. So, your block cannot be bigger than 1,600 feet all the way around. And then any individual block length can't be bigger than 600 feet. And then here's kind of how the core street spacing might look and work. So you're going to have to provide, a core street every 1,000 feet. And then just to make sure that you're not trying to get away with not providing enough core street, there's a requirement here that says a core street cannot be 600 feet from the outside edge of your property line. So you'll see that once you've kind of got your core streets, there's this idea of a secondary street. And so fundamentally, core streets and secondary streets, they're very similar, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But the real big difference between the two is that you're going to have a higher requirement to pull buildings up to core streets than you are with secondary streets. So secondary streets will allow some parking, basically, to abut the street. So, what we find when we're looking at these kinds of development, that because of the demands of surface parking in some of these settings, it doesn't necessarily make sense. It's not necessarily doable to require buildings to front every single street, unless you're really into the parking structure world. So this just gives you an idea of what these streets look like. So they're very similar in terms of the actual street itself, have very similar dimensions. But what a village core street is going to require bike facilities on it every time. It's going to require parallel parking, and then it's going to require bulb outs at the intersections to reduce the pedestrian crossing distance. So a village secondary street, they're very similar, but you don't necessarily have to provide a bike lane. It's kind of the developer's choice. And you don't necessarily have to provide on-street parking. It's kind of the developer's choice. And then bump outs won't be required. So there's some subtle differences there. And as you'll see, you can pull a certain amount of parking up to the street, which you cannot for a village core street. So, and then just some other typologies, I guess, street typologies that we have in here. So there's an incentive in the block requirements that allows you to increase your overall block perimeter requirement or your block length requirement if you provide an alley or if you provide a pedestrian connection that meets these requirements. So I'm just going to kind of move on to the frontage component of this. So once you've kind of got your streets in, that's one piece. So now you've kind of got to make sure that your streets are lined with, for the most part, active buildings that kind of create the pedestrian environment that we're all trying to achieve here. And so you'll see that we've got these different frontages with different names, and they kind of have different requirements. So I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but the active core frontage is kind of your most active frontage. And if you think of kind of like, retail storefronts is really what that's saying. And so, 20% of your kind of block front in your development has to have this active core mapped on it. And then the rest of the core streets can use these other frontages. And then the village secondary streets, you can kind of put any kind of frontage you want down, but you're also allowed to do this secondary frontage, which is the frontage that allows you to kind of have a little bit of surface parking kind of peeking through. So apologize, this is not my greatest work, but I just kind of want to show you how that kind of plays out on a kind of theoretical site. Using, for the most part, graphics that are already in the document. So if this is just kind of like existing street, and then if you could imagine this is kind of like an undeveloped parcel, or maybe it's an old mole or something. And so, but anyway, you're going to redevelop the whole site. So you're going to kind of come in and you're going to kind of have to think about your block and street network that I kind of showed you earlier. So you're going to have to meet these requirements. And this is just kind of one way that you can do it. We're showing right here. This is, a fairly flexible system. You just kind of have to, for the most part, meet the dimensional standards that are laid out here. So, these blocks have to meet 1,600 feet and 600 feet, and then you kind of have to meet the spacing requirements for the core streets. So kind of after you've got your streets down, then there's this, what I said earlier, 20% of your kind of block frontage here has to have what we're calling active core frontage on it. So your kind of core retail frontage. So, you can't really require too much of that stuff because, we really are saying these need to be kind of retail components of the development. And so don't really want to second guess the marketplace too much. Now, on these business, and that's kind of developer's choice. You could choose to put retail in this blue. You could choose to put office. You could also put kind of residential as well, like townhouses or apartments. So this just shows you a little bit what a code page might look like for these different frontages. So this active core, again, like I said, this is kind of your core retail frontage. So, and then the business core is, if you just think like office, that's really what we're trying to allow for here. And so when you look at some of these numbers, and I'll show you a little bit about what each of these gray bars means and what it's trying to achieve when it's regulating things. But you'll see that, the build to width here is 90%, and then in office it's 80%. And that buildings have to be, within 5 feet of the front lot line for active core, and then business core, it can be back 10 feet a little bit. So what do we regulate here? You may have heard some of these terms, but just to give you some idea of where we're coming from. So the build to requirement, it's no longer just a minimum setback anymore. We've kind of added a maximum setback. So we kind of want buildings pulled up to the street. So this build to requirement is kind of pulling buildings up to the street. And so, we found that it sometimes isn't enough to just pull buildings up to the street. We're worried about, to a certain extent, what's going on inside those buildings at a kind of a crude level, right? So we don't want parking, right? So this is your occupiable depth. And so what we're trying to do is get some kind of active use in there and making sure that if it is structured parking, that it's not, the structured parking component is kind of set back out of that 20-foot depth. And we're trying to keep hallways out of there to a certain extent, and then storage so that, it's really space that is inviting and you can kind of interact with the outside. So parking location is kind of always a big deal, right? We kind of have to tolerate it to a certain extent, but what we don't want is parking in between buildings and the street. And then, making sure that we're getting good ground stories, right? So if you guys have ever been to like a shopping precinct or something, and you walk inside some of the stores, they got these great ground stories, and it feels open and spacious, and and that stuff is, that's not cheap, right? So we only want to have those really tall ground stories where it's appropriate in kind of our retail setting. So if you're in a residential setting, maybe your ground story height is going to be a little lower. Ground full elevation is kind of important. We want to make sure that buildings are not getting too high off the floor, and so we probably need to make sure that we're aware of flood implications when we're regulating this particular requirement. And then transparency, making sure that basically there's not big blank walls along a street edge. There's there's nothing worse as a pedestrian when you're walking along and there's a building pulled up to the street, but there's nothing going on. You cannot see in that building. There's no eyes on the street. This all seems very basic, but sometimes this stuff doesn't happen. And I'm sure you've been in those settings where buildings are pulled up to the street. They may have transparency, but there's no doors. So there's, how do you get into the building? What's the point of you being on that side of the street if you cannot get into the building? So, making sure there's street facing entrances, and then in certain settings, make sure they're at regular spacing so that, if you're going in one store, you can walk down the sidewalk and go into another store. Making sure, for existing streets, making sure we've got adequate sidewalk width, making sure we've got street trees planted, driveways, there's, again, necessarily we have to have these, but we want to make sure they're as limiting as possible so that we don't have too many curb cuts. And then when we do have a curb cut, the curb cut is as narrow as it can be, so that as a pedestrian, when you're walking across a driveway, it's, theoretically as safe as it can be. So here's just just showing you, so you can kind of compare what these frontages look like from one to another. Your active core, your business core, your residential core, and this is if you want to do townhouses or apartments or something like that, that's what you would look at. You would look at the rules of this frontage. And then the secondary frontage, again, that allows a little bit of parking to sneak up in there. And so last but not least, there are recommended uses by sub-district. There is I think it's a 4-page use table where we kind of listed out kind of a whole bunch of uses and where they might be appropriate or where they might not be appropriate. So just a kind of summary. So in the urban villages, there is some concern that residential is the kind of hot button item, and so you're allowed to do residential here. It's just limited up to 35% of your total gross square footage of your development kind of permitted. But there is an option here that you can go get a special use and do more. So it also allows live work, civic uses like libraries, museums, places of worship. I think it's important to note here that there's no drive-throughs allowed in this particular, I think in this whole study area, no drive-throughs allowed. No gas stations allowed in the urban villages. It allows, retail, banks, daycares, hotels, again, a limitation of up to 100 rooms by right. Allows kind of some kind of what you might call light industrial activity, and we're calling it kind of makerspace. But, again, a focus on this kind of technology and office and employment in this district. This is kind of your go-to kind of mixed use village area. So with that, I'm just going to kind of walk you through briefly the what we're calling the non-village districts. So all the districts outside of the villages. Just kind of run through them real quick. And so the real distinction here between these districts is some of its form and the parameters associated with the sub-district. Height primarily, building width, but a lot of it is down to the uses that are allowed. So in this particular instance, no residential is being recommended. Again, civic uses, libraries, museums, places of worship. No drive-throughs, no hotels. This is the one district that is going to continue to recommend gas stations, but it allows a great variety of commercial uses: restaurants, banks, daycares, marine fabrication, and then offices. Just making sure that we're accommodating the kind of water activity that's going on, right? So we're allowing for boat building and boat repair. Maker tech. So this is kind of your kind of key employment area, I would say. So there's again no residential, and then not much retail activity is being recommended here. No hotels. So this is a real focus on preserving land in the study area for some of these technology related uses for the future. And then Maker, I would kind of, relate this district. This is kind of your industrial district, for lack of a better term. So this is where you might see, auto repair show up and car washes, stuff that you might not want to see in some of the other districts. Outdoor storage of, contractor storage yard where you might, and kind of warehousing uses, which are not super active. And then the Old Navy Hospital site, which is Waterfront Campus 3. Maybe residential is okay down here. People like to be out by the water. Some limited kind of retail activity, but then a real focus on stuff that's happening down at the waterfront. So, marina, docks and slips, commercial marine oriented recreation, boating instruction, but also, allowing this kind of research arm to go on here as well. So just, this is I guess these are the mapped portions of the frontage overlays, because, due to the size constraints of these urban villages, we have no way of really mapping those, right? So that's the developer's job, is to do that. But some of these existing streets that we know about that are happening or exist today, we can kind of think about what the built form might be along those streets. So I'm just going to kind of run through these real quick. The arterial frontage. So there's one real key difference going on here, and it has to do with this build to requirement. So the build to requirement for the urban village districts, say it's set at like 80% or something. That means when you come in to develop, you need to provide 80% of that frontage has to be occupied by a building, kind of in a sense at day one. Well, what these frontages are doing is saying, well, this particular one is saying, we understand that, we can't really pull buildings up to the street in every single instance here. So what we're asking for is, some portion of your building has to be located in this build to area. At this particular instance, it's 5 feet and then 15 feet back. So this district right here, it's 50%, I think, of your building has to be pulled up into this build to area. So that allows for, parking to the sides of buildings. So that's a really critical difference. And then you'll see that, because these are really auto-oriented focused streets for the most part, hopefully they won't be in the future, but we really need to be aware of how vehicles access these sites to make them as pedestrian friendly as possible. So in this particular case, you can't have a driveway within 200 feet of another driveway. And then the most you can have is kind of a 2-lane driveway. And then, the width of your driveway cannot be any wider than 12 feet. So you could have like a 24-foot wide driveway, and you could have a median in there too. If it was right in, right out or something like that. So then you'll see the north arterial, which is this northern portion here, actually allows buildings to be set back. This is, so you just have to meet a front setback of 5 feet, and you can choose to pull your building up to the street. But what we're saying here is that because of the kind of industrial nature of the land uses associated here, that it's okay to pull your building back to the street. Now, you're going to have to, your parking lot is going to have to be landscaped. So you're going to have trees and islands, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But you're also going to have to, make sure the edge of your parking lot is landscaped or screened appropriately, so that it's not just parking pulled up on the street. So then we have the boulevard, which is, coming down off the bridge. These are kind of the entrances into the villages for the most part. And so you'll probably notice that there's also a strategy going on with these urban villages that say, you know, it doesn't necessarily make sense to pull buildings up to some of these bigger streets on the edges, and that there's a real focus here of really trying to get the best pedestrian environment within the development. So we have these boulevards where, you know, like I said earlier, because of this push and pull with surface parking, we are allowing some surface parking to come up to the street. But what we're not allowing potentially is, you know, no driveways, so that, you know, because of traffic also coming down off the bridge, we're not really sure, you know, what if it's appropriate to have a bunch of curb cuts on this particular frontage. And then the local is kind of all the stuff that's kind of left over as much as anything. And this just gives you an example of what these buildings could look like in the future, kind of all together. And then just some remaining provisions that I kind of alluded to up front. So we're talking about, you know, getting people out of cars and, you know, getting people on bicycles with the kind of bicycle infrastructure. Then, you know, maybe it makes sense to make sure that when you get to where you're going, there's bike racks there. So there is a consideration of a bike parking provisions in this document. And then, you know, making sure that when there is parking lots, they're appropriately landscaped with median islands and trees, and then making sure that you know, the edge of these parking lots is appropriately screened down here, and then making sure that, you know, kind of outdoor work areas or outdoor storage areas or contract storage areas are appropriately screened as well. And then I kind of alluded this way back at the beginning, but this idea that, you know, when new development happens next to some of the existing residential districts, making sure that the height and setback scale of buildings is appropriate for the abutting development. And that concludes my little presentation for you. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions.
Actually, Colin, can you just talk generally about form-based code and the relationship between frontage requirements and promoting particular kinds of commerce? Just generally.
In terms of what exactly?
So why do you have some kind of frontage types in some places? I mean, it might be obvious to you and the people that are working on this, but for the general public, why do you want to have some kind of frontages in some places and other kinds in other places?
Well, I would say our I'm not quite sure if this is what you're getting at, but we are focusing our most walkable frontages on the larger sites, because there's some sense that the larger streets are the larger streets, and it's going to be difficult to accommodate having buildings being pulled up to those streets and having things associated with that street, like on-street parking and wider sidewalks.
Okay, so is a simple way to say it that there are certain street types and some really focus on pedestrian activity, continuity, and transparency so that you can encourage retail and other kinds of commerce, and those kinds of uses may be discouraged by the shape of streets that are, say, you know, state roads that are designed for vehicular traffic.
Yes, you put it way better than I could have. Thank you.
Okay, so with that in mind, do any members of the board have questions for Colin? And let me just get to the panel.
I realized that was a kind of a lot of material to kind of wrap your head around. So
I'm looking for Peter. I don't see the hands raised on my panelist screen.
Steve he's waving his hand across the screen, Madam Chair.
Oh, he's read. Okay. Okay, Steve, will you please, so first, I just want to say to board members, please don't speak unless you're recognized by the chair, and wait to be recognized. And if I don't see you in the, if I don't see you, then Peter, please just aware me of that. So Steve, please ask the question.
Yeah, a couple. JT Connell and Admiral Calbus, are they part of this design structure where they're owned by the state, or how are we going to handle that?
No, I'm going to let someone else answer that question.
Okay, so I just, for clarification, Colin is a code specialist. He is not a general planner, and he is not a designer per se. So what the team had to do was interface the code specialty with other aspects of planning. So either Trish or Alan could answer this question.
I'd be happy to start. This is Alan Mountjoy again with MBBJ. I think Colin recognized, we all recognize that there are existing roads on the site that have certain constraints. Many of them carry lots of traffic and have multiple lanes. The frontage requirements, as Colin talked about, do affect modestly the kinds of buildings that we expect to see along those either existing buildings or future buildings. So in some cases, we're asking for some of the building to come closer to the street frontage, but we're not expecting those roads to be the sort of fabulous walking streets that we're imagining in the village district. So these guidelines attempt to guide development, but we're not telling the state highway how to build that road. We're asking for certain development controls when parcels get redeveloped that abut those state highways.
So Alan, how are you going to control 200-foot entrance, every 200 foot to have a road when off of a state highway? You know, I don't get that.
I think the purpose of that particular requirement was that if you are a single landowner and let's say you had 3 curb cuts and they were all 25 feet apart from each other, if you were going to ask the city to redevelop, we would ask you to not have 3 curb cuts in 200 feet because that is a very vehicular oriented environment. If you could consolidate your entrances, if you had a lot, let's say that's 400 feet long, you could build 2 entrances to it. But if you have a lot that's less than 200 feet of frontage, we're asking you to have 1 single access point. That's really all that is saying. Correct, Colin?
Yeah, and you may have to work with the state as well.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. The state's going to have to permit all of these curb cuts that the design is requiring.
Well, I guess it's not technically requiring, and these are kind of guidance at this point. So I would say it's probably good that the city has these parameters ready to go, so that when they have the conversation with the state, they're already kind of on the table, and the state knows where the city is coming from.
My next question is, in this pandemic age, people don't want to really get out of their cars to get service on certain occasions, similar to a CVS drive-through, which I prefer way more than getting out of my car and going in. Yet you're restricting those. And there may be more than just a CVS. There may be more that would be acceptable, not a drive-through Dunkin' Donuts. That's not what I'm talking about. So how could we handle that situation where a drive-through would be acceptable? Does it have to go to a zoning board of appeals once this thing is all settled?
I believe the underlying zoning did not allow for drive-ins in this area, and we followed that guidance. I think you're right. I think some sort of procedure could be in place for a drive-in under particular circumstances.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Can I just say that it's important to understand that long before any of this is implemented, the pandemic will be gone. I mean, this is a year, a long-term vision. So I think getting caught up in short-term needs is probably not the best way to view the document.
I think it's going to be around for a long time, Kim, so I disagree with that. So let me move to the next one. Charging stations, is there any input that you could give for similar to that? We're getting into an electric age and there's going to be a lot of electric cars. So could that be put in as a suggestion or requirement with these new stores being developed?
I would, there are a few things in this plan that I think are more, make more sense as city-wide zoning amendments. So I think that charging stations as part of a parking requirement is probably already on the books in the city. And that should be citywide as guidance for X number of charging stations in residential and in commercial uses. And we'd be happy to adapt those, but that should absolutely be part of a citywide program, because it doesn't make sense to just apply it to this district. Although we'd be happy to see that as part of the underlying zoning in the parking requirements.
Mhm.
I have one last question. When I see your rendition of what your new main roads are going to look like, they look like New York City. They don't look like Newport. Sorry to say, but that's just my opinion. Maybe not everybody might agree with it. But what I've seen with your adaptations are not pleasing to me.
I think that probably what many people are reacting to is the additional bike lanes that we're seeing in these. I would say that it makes them appear wider. I would say that the image on the right, the Village Secondary Street, is not dissimilar to many of the streets in Newport. And there are lots of smaller streets too. We're not suggesting you can't build alleys or anything like that. I think the bicycle accommodations is something that is increasingly important for alternative mobility. The only thing I could see here is maybe combining a bikeway on one side of the street as a two-way bicycle way, as opposed to having it just on both sides. So I could see some flexibility there as long as bicycles are accommodated. We think that the bicycle accommodations on these core streets is absolutely essential to the future of cities in general, as providing ways for people to move around because people are sick of the traffic. And if they don't have a decent alternative, they are going to have to get in their cars, and we want to give them options.
So
I'm a bicyclist, so you got me there. What is the
excuse me, Stephen.
What?
Is your concern the width of the street,
Or
the
the-
zero lot lines between buildings, or the building heights?
I would say the width of the street.
Yeah,
It looks-
so this
it looks-
is, so this was a dilemma for the planning process, because there are modern standards for street widths that we have to meet, and especially for the state roads. And it's really challenging. This was a persistent concern of mine, that it seems like a wide, busy street and not an intimate pedestrian street like those we have in Newport. Colin and Alan, can you just speak to why the streets are so wide in the pictures?
Well, I could. So the actual lane widths themselves are pretty narrow.
What are they?
So maybe
12 feet?
the requirement would be 9 minimum and no bigger than 10 feet, which is pretty tight in most settings. And so maybe this drawing, unfortunately, isn't as reflective of those lane widths as it could be.
Have you thought about making one-ways every other street? That would limit the size of the streets?
I haven't. I can tell you, retailers aren't big fans of one-way streets in general.
Bicyclists are.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar enough with the plan yet, Steve, but there are streets that are pedestrian and cyclist streets that don't have vehicular traffic. And those streets do create a smaller scale that's more familiar to
Great,
Newport.
yeah, that would be nice. It's a scale that I was concerned about.
Yes, I share that concern.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks,
Who's
Steve.
next?
You're welcome.
I'm sorry. So I'm not seeing the hand raise function here, Stephen. I mean, Peter. All right.
Madam-
Jeff,
Yes.
Jeff, you please speak.
Sure. I really like your the active core aspect of it. I think that's honestly really neat, and I can see that being used as like an open cafe and that kind of thing. But you have it, if I'm reading this right, which I'm probably not, is that it's strictly on core corners. Can you have active core against existing streets? Like, for example, let's say the intersection, between the RK Center, Admiral Calvis, and the Highline building, the Carpinato Center, can there be open space, active core mixed in with arteries, core streets, everything else to really kind of pull it all in?
I'd like to answer that one because I actually think that, Colin, if you go back to your diagram where you built up the kind of the model there, where you showed where the active, this thing here, and then you add the buildings. I think one of the features that I think took me a little bit to figure out is that these core streets have to extend to the edges of projects. And that's why they're so valuable, because they link this project to the edge of a site. So where, let's say, that core street abuts either Admiral Calvis or where it abuts, let's say, the new entrance road that is proposed by DOT, those corners would be active. And we have an illustration of what that looks like in our renderings, where we illustrated what it would look like for Halsey Street at the corner of where one of these core streets intercept Halsey Street. And that would be where active core would meet the edge of what might be considered kind of an arterial otherwise, and create that gateway effect. And that once you've got onto the site, then there's a contiguous active street frontages all the way into the site. And we have some renderings of what that looks like as well, hypothetical renderings. So
that's what we shared last time we met as well.
Happy to show that to you. There's illustrations there that do show that.
I guess I was just kind of commenting more on how the character base kind of presented the active core aspect. None of it laid against existing streets. Most of it's only at street corners. Not a lot of it's full front of core. So I mean, is it flexible enough where you can do more than 20% as active core as long as a minimum?
Yeah.
Percent?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's just the minimum.
Okay.
And so, I mean, part of that might be the negotiation of the approval, depending on where the site is and what the parameters are of the proposed site plan.
Okay.
Could move that active frontage to an existing street if it made sense.
No, that sounds great, honestly, because that's what I would love to see is I'm more concerned with the existing streets than the core secondary, because I know that the developers are going to do a good job at utilizing every inch of frontage that they create for themselves. So I just want to make sure that the existing street is better compensated. Like the arterials up JT Connell, for example, if that truly was pedestrian friendly, that would really open up the corridor for more pedestrians. Right now, it's terrifying to walk up that street. What was another question?
Yeah, Jeff, and I think that to speak to that point, the code is really an abstraction of an idea of smaller blocks, walkable streets, certain patterns for construction, but it obviously has to be tempered by the reality of a particular site.
Yeah.
And that tempering happens during the approval process.
And again, this and this isn't going to be the actual zoning code. This is just character-based code. This is going to be a reference. The city's creating a zoning code that will work in concert with this. Is that our goal, vision, future, Madam Chair?
Trish, do you want to speak to that?
I do. Yes, Jeff, that is the goal for this, that we have the base and the float that's been worked on by the zoning working group. But after the plan, if that's approved and moves through the process, those need to be changed to reflect the requirements that show in the plan and also in the form-based code.
Okay. Thank you.
And Trish, can I just ask you to speak generally about how the form-based code or the way we think about it here might be applicable to thinking throughout the city?
So one of the things, the city is very old, and our zoning is based more on a modern version of zoning, something that's basically developed for a suburban community. And as a result, most of the parcels throughout the city are non-conforming, which makes any type of change to buildings difficult. And most things involve a trip to the Zoning Board of Review, even though they follow the development patterns of the area that they're in. So in the future, a form-based code like this, also called a character code because it has a certain character and helps support the character of an area, would be applicable to other areas of the city that are made non-conforming by inappropriate zoning. So we could develop a character code for other areas of the city that have a specific character, like historic districts or Ocean Drive, different places that have a defined character that would do better with a code that more suits their specific needs and their current patterns of development. So the goal is in the future right now to use this as design guidelines to see how it operates and the results that we get from it, to give the state enabling laws a chance to catch up with this sort of newer type of zoning, and then to look to incorporate this first in the North End and then use this as a role model in other areas of the city where it could be really beneficial for us.
Okay. Jeff, do you have another question?
I have a lot of comments on the use schedule, but I don't want to open that can of worms. I'd rather let us continue the conversation on everything else.
Yeah, and understanding that the working group product is going to be the zoning product for now, that use schedule is a guidance. Are there any questions from other members of the board? I'm looking. Elizabeth, Melissa, Paul, anyone? Okay, so if no one else wishes to speak, then let's move on. Next, what I would like to do is invite Peter Friedrich to present the questions that were submitted by the community, and his Peter and Trish develop the answers to the community questions. Paul?
You had some hands up in the attendees. I don't know if it was open for that, but
It's not yet.
Okay.
All right.
Madam
So,
Chair,
Madam Chair,
Peter's,
public comment on the character-based code. There was hands up.
So there will be public comment, and they can speak on the code at the public comment time. This is the public comment section now, but we're beginning with the written comments and the letters. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Peter.
did you want to say something, Trish?
I just wanted to remind you, I have something to add after response number 16.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. Let me just try and change this to speaker view real quick. All right. So when we had our meeting on the 22nd, there was a question asked about displacement, and the chair directed the project team to come up with a more comprehensive answer. So that has been posted with the agenda, and that answer is here. And I think we all understand the housing displacement that's been going on in Newport as a result of rising property values. And what this plan is specifically doing to address that is a four-pronged approach. And again, this plan is supplementing the 2017 comprehensive plan, which is really the overarching guide for the city of Newport. So the first item is preserving our deed restricted affordable housing, and the plan calls out the existing major parcels in the study area that's shown on the illustrative plan on page 50. And it does propose their preservation. That's further expanded upon on page 52. The second item is preventing housing loss. And one of the things that we know has been going on in the city is the conversion of housing to short-term rentals, which this board has studied a lot in the last few years. So that again is mentioned on a different part of page 52, and I can pull those up if people need me to highlight the text specifically. And then the R10 zoning is really one of the city's key strategies for limiting short-term rentals and preventing housing loss. You're really limited what you can do in the R10 zone, which is a good chunk of the city other than provide housing. Third is adding more housing units, which is, again, is important. Having more supply will reduce the overall demand and the prices that go along with that. So this North End Urban Plan calls for a significant increase in density in the innovation zone. And then by keeping the R10 zoning, that actually allows for a lot more density than currently exists in the North End. So if you think about areas closer to Broadway, that is R10 zoning, and the lots are much smaller than the lots that are up in the North End. One of the things to note about some of the housing opportunities in the innovation zone is that as we're adding units, that will decrease some of the demands on the immediate surrounding properties. So the units will be lower maintenance than the existing units up in the North End. And there's the opportunity for workforce housing, which has not traditionally been produced on the island. And some of that is achieved through the density of the area. You'll have units with smaller floor plates, which will directly result in lower costs to buyers or renters. And the fourth one is this idea of the year-round economy, which I think has been talked a lot about by the city, and this is the area plan for the land use focus of promoting the year-round economy in Newport. And again, we're focusing away from tourism and looking at some of the other more stable year-round employment opportunities that also have the opportunity for direct higher wages for employees. So the next item is after that October 22nd meeting, we received 4 emails with written questions from members of the community, and those have been compiled in this document. There's 23 questions total. The first 9 questions were submitted by Lila Ray, and that email was co-signed by 6 individuals: Ronald Lee Fleming, Matthew Esposito, Julia Verlaine, Ryan Kelly, and Elliot Stoltz. I am familiar with Mr. Fleming and Mr. Esposito. Mr. Fleming is a resident on Bellevue Avenue, and Mr. Esposito is an associate of his. I don't know the other individuals. I'm not sure if they're on this call. And then questions 10 and 11 were submitted by Alex Chuman, who is a resident of Brindley Street, which is in the K. Catherine neighborhood. And then questions 12 and 15 were submitted by Lola Herrera Jimenez, who's a Bedloe Ave resident. And the remaining questions were submitted by Jean Reisman on behalf of the Health Equity Zone Greening Urban Spaces Working Group. So what I'll do is go ahead and I'll read through these questions. So the first question is, The NBBJ plan provides suggestions for growth and design and planning guidelines, but not a detailed actionable plan to best support phase growth. Can NBBJ provide more of a roadmap or action plan for potential growth? For example, we know the bridge development is funded and likely happening, and the Carpiano development will likely be supported as well. What recommendations would NBBJ put forth for the city to consider or prioritize to best support those developments? And staff provided the answer to that question along with question 2, which we thought was similar. It is our understanding that this plan is to be adopted into the comprehensive plan as a reference. Without clear action items and implementation, how does the city propose to remain accountable and reinforce the suggestions put forth by NBBJ? The answer provided is implementation of key recommendations in the plan will be the purview of the planning board and the city council with support from planning staff. Some recommended actions will be included in future public capital expenditure plans, such as the public safety facility, while others will be requested of private parties as projects come before the city for review and approval. Ideally, specific projects will be required to provide public benefits that directly mitigate project impacts, such as the need for better pedestrian crossings, open space, or job training for affordable housing, to name just a few. Question 3, was a phase plan considered? For example, partial development of highlight site with corresponding and commensurate development of streetscape transportation plan could allow for more holistic and sustainable growth that supports the development and community long-term. The concern is the highlight Carpiano development becomes a retail desert, like many others, if supported by city-supported and funded initiatives as outlined in the plan. And the city may not have the money to keep pace with the proposed developments. Answer, it is expected the North End Urban Plan will be implemented in phases. Land development projects and development plan review requires project phases to be shown as part of an application. The plan and accompanying design guidelines will also help to establish project features that will be compatible with future development, such as an integrated pedestrian network that will extend beyond the boundaries of one single development, the former highlight site being just one example. Number 4, what is the proposed action plan to address the brownfield sites left behind by highlight removal and bridge alignment and encourage responsible development of those sites so they don't lie fallow? Answer, the former highlight site received a $250,000 grant from the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management to address contamination in 2019. The Newport Pell Bridge approaches reconstruction parameters will need to be further explored as the project design is finalized. Number 5, the NBBJ plan doesn't provide guidance for a community investment plan for developers, which would provide a guideline for developers to invest in or build desired facilities or provide 5%, I believe was what they were typing, or whatever percent of the investment to a fund dedicated to North End civic improvements that support the plan. Is there a consideration for a requirement like this? Answer, developer-funded civic improvements are among the community benefits cited by residents and supported by the plan. I just lost my place, I apologize. Other benefits such as roadway improvements, bike paths, tree plantings, open space, and stormwater improvements are all part of an overall development plan review and land development project and may be conditions of approval. There is no requirement for an investment fund under consideration at this time. Number 6, while it has contributed to a community needs checklist, there is little suggestion as to how to achieve it. Can NBBJ provide some guidance as to how their plan will support the HES list? An important part of the development of a project is communication between area residents and the developer. The community needs listed in the plan represent amenities identified and preferred by the community. It will be considered with every proposed development in the North End and in conjunction with any future city improvements in the area. Over time, and as goals are achieved, the list may be amended by the community. Number 7, the NBBJ plan provides multiple suggestions for foot and bike traffic, open air dining and gathering, and outdoor recreation spaces. As an environment that spends half of the year in snow and cold, there was little to no recommendation for community space or transportation or ways to engage in new development in inclement weather. Answer, low carbon design options will be utilized to expand community space, transportation, and engagement opportunities in new development and in inclement weather. The proposed intermodal Center would be the focus of transit connections for the North End, providing year-round weather-protected areas for bus or shuttle transit use. Separated multimodal paths provide safe alternatives that can be plowed and kept open during snow events with protection from traffic by snow storage areas. Number 8, does this plan provide for community art requirements in support of the partnership between the Rhode Island Department of Health and the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, as referenced with a link? Answer, art opportunities did not come up during public engagement, but could be included as a public benefit during negotiations with developers and part of public parcels available after highway removal. Number 9, as communities and developments grow, the need for community resources increases as well. The proposed foot/bike path to the Florence Gray Center is a good recommendation. The existing Florence Gray Center provides many needed services for the North End community, but needs further support and repair to continue to provide these services, especially if the community increases. There's also mention of the potential use of the Maha Center. Is there a plan to better tie these facilities together as a community services or community civic center? Answer, there is no currently proposed future use for the Maha Center, and the city has supported Florence Gray with $600,000 in renovation grants over the last 2 years.
Peter, can I just interrupt you and ask you to
Yeah.
just paraphrase the questions and get to the answer?
Okay. So the number 10 goes into a fair amount of detail about the use table and talks about workforce housing as well as the increase in housing rates. So the answer that was provided referenced housing as the second highest ranked community benefit and said it can be part of a community benefits agreement. And then we provided a lot more detail with regard to this in that answer to the question from the meeting on the 22nd about displacement. Number 11 talks about equitable development and is specifically looking for more information on community benefits. There's an organization called For Working Families that has done a lot of work on this nationally, and that's really the best resource. And we noted that typically in Rhode Island, development requires subsidy because we have construction costs similar to Boston, but much lower rents and sale prices. But there might be an opportunity in Newport for small, municipal charges, I'll call it, or give backs from developers. Number 12 talks about how CBAs are not mentioned in the equity section, and it doesn't recommend that the negotiation process must include and prioritize community voices. And the answer from staff notes that the CBAs are mentioned in the implementation section, and it is the staff's position that the equity section doesn't, in fact, call for inclusion and prioritization of community members, with a reference to that sentence on page 71. And then Trish is going to talk a little bit about the proposed amendment to the implementation section, specifically mentioning expanding upon community benefits. Then questions 13, 14, and 15 were compiled. Those questions talk about resiliency-oriented industries, digital industries, advanced manufacturing, what kind of jobs will be provided, and what does that actually mean for the businesses in the district. And then those questions also reference the blue economy and the green economy and associated jobs and business opportunities. And I think the consensus in Newport has been for a while that those are the growth market opportunities, and they're also high wage industries. So the continued uncertainty at the federal level has limited development of the climate change industry to a degree. But I think this idea has been studied by the city for years, and one of the key components to make sure that jobs are actually made available to area residents is making sure that the skill sets of residents line up with the job needs. And so focusing on job training moving forward will be a big requirement. Trish, did you want to chime in now, or do you want to wait until I talk about number 16 a little more?
No, now is a fine time. It relates to that question also. I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk about some current activity that's happening in the blue economy. The following information is from a current initiative of the Greater Newport Chamber. They state that the blue economy is identified as the greatest opportunity to create new quality jobs. It already employs over 36,000 people statewide with an impact of over $5.6 billion for the state. The Connect Greater Newport Chamber is focused on economic recovery in the region, primarily due to the COVID pandemic. Their current initiative is looking to support job opportunities in the blue economy subsectors, focused on better employment opportunities for low to moderate income families, as well as we seek diversity in the economy in general. As part of this, they're looking to partner with local agencies to put on a Blue Economy Careers Consortium. And these are things that are currently happening in this area of activity that directly impact or could impact low to moderate income families. Thank you.
So looking more closely at question 16, it's asking for some specific evidence that businesses will physically move to Newport's Innovation District. And it's looking for information about market research. And I think the staff's response is that to our knowledge, there are already area businesses potentially interested in relocating or expanding to the Innovation District. And we talk about how the concept of the Innovation Hub came about, and that as a consequence of land use regulations not being changed previously, as well as the waiting for the write-off project to complete, those concepts have not moved forward. So this plan will be a big step forward in terms of increasing the attractiveness of this area for these types of these sectors. Number 17 is looking for it's a very specific question, looking for the difference between advanced manufacturing, research and technology, which is a use listed in the character code, and advanced manufacturing, research and production. And the main difference there is that use of the word production, which allows the actual operation of advanced manufacturing, whereas the other use is more of an R&D type use. Number 18 asks what happens if the forecasted development or desired development does not happen. And our staff response is that there are many existing businesses in the area that can grow and expand regardless of any new development that might come forth. Number 19 talks about resiliency and is asking what might happen to some of these big projects if the development does not come forth. And the staff's response to that is that these projects are necessary regardless of any development, just like the tide gates that are needed elsewhere in the city. So those will be priorities whether or not development comes. Number 20 talks about equity, mentions a few different examples of that. And it expresses a concern that those measures are optional, and is wondering whether those the goals are realistically met with equity options, with equity measures being optional. And again, staff's position is that those measures are not optional. They are firm commitments. If this plan is adopted, that equity will be a priority and development will be held accountable to those goals. Number 21 was looking at perceived disparities between levels of analysis between the innovation district and the rest of the study area. And the primary reason for that was that the innovation zone is proposed for significant change in the rest of the study area. The intent is to preserve and enhance what is there. And then that same question 21 asked why recommendations are scattered throughout the document and not organized in one place. And that's just the way the plan is set up. The plan is set up by the themes, and that was the organizing principle. Number 22 asked specifically about the fire station. And the note is that the civic services were the #1 priority of community benefits, and there is a disparity between the North End fire provisions and the rest of the city. Number 23 talks about opportunity and the concern that equity is just one of many trade-offs among other competing pressures. And the response is that equity is an integral aspect of this plan, and that if equity is not achieved through this plan, then the plan fails.
Great. Thank you, Peter. All right, to everybody watching, I realize this is not Action TV and it could be a little more exciting. However, it's really important to recognize the various public comments and to speak to them and to read them into the record. And that's why this is taking so long. I'd like to ask for a 2-minute recess, and then we'll come back and continue. Thank you.
But it's tough because I'm still not over her.
Jen,
Yes,
are you looking to speak during public comment?
if there's time, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, you're first.
Okay,
And that maybe 10 more minutes right after Trish goes through the amendments.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Can we begin? Okay. Next, I would like Trish Reynolds to just list and present the proposed amendments and direct the audience to the link on the city website so that they can review them themselves.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. We've provided a list of 4 amendments, proposed amendments to the North End Urban Plan for the board's consideration. These are text amendments that are to be inserted in specific portions of the plan. Amendment 1 is in response to concerns expressed by the community about incorporating additional language regarding community benefits agreements in the North End Urban Plan. The proposed language will inform the area zoning regulations and any council consideration of future policy issues regarding community benefits. So the way that it's organized, and you can see here, there's a table of contents. It lists the four proposed amendments. The first one is to be added to the implementation section under community benefits agreements. It's to be added at the end of page 105. and following is the text. I can read that if necessary, or if people want to take a look at it on their own, whatever your preference is, Madam Chair.
I would just like you to scroll through, show the public that this document exists and that it's available
Okay.
for their review, but please don't read it.
Okay. So this section is on equity. It's all new text to be added to the existing language that's on page 105. The second one, this is to be added after the current last paragraph of the executive summary, which obviously is at the beginning of the document. And it's a paragraph about the importance of the urban plan and its relation to economic development. The third amendment belongs in connectivity, and it's to be added to the top right column on page 57. And it has to do with the traffic issues raised on Admiral Kalfas. And the fourth amendment is in the quality section. It's to be added after the first paragraph on page 81 before the next focus area. And it has to do with the establishment of a design review body for projects within the North End.
So I just want to explain to the public, these amendments are the result of public input and questions, and then planning staff trying to aggregate that input and form a coherent recommended change to the document that the board will then vote on as an amendment. So we'll pull it up and we'll read it at the next meeting, and then we'll vote to either adopt or reject it. Okay, so thank you. Next, what I'd like to have Peter do is just show us any records that, any letters that have been submitted to the planning board regarding the North End plan. And we won't read them, but we will accept them into the record, and I would like to see them on the screen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first letter that I received commenting on the North End Urban Plan was on Friday, October 23rd. That was from Lauren DeSantis, a Halsey Street resident, expressing her concern about Halsey Street being a through street, even just for bicyclists and pedestrians. And so that letter is available on the planning board's webpage. I received two letters today. The first one came in this morning from Jennifer Jackson. And she's in attendance tonight, so I can pull that letter up on the screen and let Ms. Jackson speak to it.
Actually, let's put that off till after, and then let's just go through the rest of the letters. Or is there another attendee?
There is another attendee for the third letter.
Okay, all right. So yeah, let's begin with that, and then we'll go into comments from the general audience. And so you can admit Jen into the meeting.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Trying to get used to this Zoom. So with my letter, in a nutshell, I was asking that you guys be patient before you approve any kind of zoning or anything, and allow the community time to come together with either a community benefits or an equitable, sorry, I got notes over here, equitable development plan. We are trying to, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the company called Growth Smart. We are trying to get somebody to come in to help the community do a equitable developmental plan, but we are also funding, everything revolves around funding. As a North End resident and pretty much a Newporter, this plan of rezoning scares me. It worries me that we are going in a direction that's not for the community. We're going in a direction of trying to be more of a destination site instead of a strong family community. Think about it. Would you want to walk a block down your street and look at all these tall 3, 4, 5-story buildings when you bought a house in an area that didn't have that? And not only that, I'm concerned about DEM Have they been notified, you know, an environmental impact on all of a sudden taking away natural stormwater absorption and natural life and making it into concrete and buildings? And underneath the, I always say this, underneath that parking lot in the old High Line is a dump. Cracking that cement scares me. I've seen what pollution does. I've seen how it affects the children in the community and the health issues that it occurs. And we already know that Northside is notorious for having arsenic in the soil. So I have multiple concerns, but I just hope that the planning board is open-minded, patient, and allow things, you know, with the COVID and everything, it's kind of put us all in a different life of normal. I don't see no end anytime soon, unfortunately, because viruses change. So, but if you can be patient before you start to okay the zoning and allow us time to get together and possibly come up with better ways so that our community can benefit off of any new construction instead of places coming in and building what they want. And I was concerned about the drive-ins and the existing businesses that are on Connell Highway. Are they going to be impacted by the rezoning, or do they get grandfathered in? You know, there's the, I don't know.
So two things. When you say we, who are you talking about?
Well, a lot of people in the, when I say we, I definitely mean my husband and I, but a lot of people in the community that I speak with, that I talk to on a regular basis. And, you know, they have concerns. And there's small business owners down on Connell Highway that have their concerns too, that I know very well. You know, I talk to a lot of different people. So when I say we, it's primarily me and my husband, but I do speak to a lot of people in the community, small businesses. So, yes.
Thank you. And Peter, Patricia, can you speak to the grandfathering issue?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So one of the reasons that the plan was broken up into those character areas that we saw at the beginning in the presentation is that we were responding to concerns of the community that they wanted to see continued mixed use and continue of support of the existing small businesses. So the way the plan is organized, that those businesses along the JT Connell Highway in that area are allowed to remain for as long as they want. They're allowed to expand, or they're allowed to change into some other allowed use. So there's going to be no immediate impact or any impact at all that's negative to those existing businesses. They are part of the plan, and keeping them as viable businesses is part of the plan.
And may I please ask just one more question?
Sure.
You said that, you know, the people that did the surveys and stuff like that, but part of the survey never asked people where they live, you know, and part of NENA, North End Neighborhood Alliance, and a lot of people I speak to that were part of that, you know, a lot of our wishes and our choices didn't show up. You know, we did talk about art. Art was one of the main important things that our children thrive for. Art, they love the video gaming rooms is what they're called, you know, arcades, they want roller skating rinks. So a lot of this was spoken at the initial North End urban planning meeting that they had at the Met School. And it's like, you know, you said the survey, was it this last survey that was done online? And again, where was the, and I'm not saying any part of any new Porter is less important than the other, but I know that you guys try to focus on the immediate neighborhoods that will be impacted by the development. And it's like, but did you take into consideration to say, like, your voice is important, but what neighborhood are you coming from? Because a lot of the NENA residents, they're very disappointed with the choices that the city has chosen to make the zoning into. You know, it's not very equitable.
Right. We do acknowledge that there was no information provided about addresses, and that was an oversight in the survey process. A lot of this also, they did gather at the in-person public forum that was well attended. And one of the things about this list is we are recommending that all public and community benefits have a lot of community input. And I don't think that this is a one-time list, but it's something that evolves and can change over time based on community input. So if there are new priorities that arise for the community, those voices will be heard and they'll be incorporated as part of a negotiation process with developers.
So it's important to understand that this is a roadmap for development, but development will all have to undergo a review process. And in every single review process, there will be opportunity for public input. Okay, so
Thank you.
with that, let's go to the next letter.
Okay. So the next letter is, I believe it's from the Health Equity Zone Housing Group. It came in earlier this evening, so let me just pull it up. Yes, and Christian Belgian is here to speak to it. Yeah, there's Christian.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi. So
Oh,
Peter's going to bring up the letter, and I'll just refer you to, I think, the third page. The letter, you know, it's here, it's in the record now, and I'm not going to go through and read it all. You can all do that on your own time. But on the third page are the signatures, where the signature sheets begin. And at the top of each of the signature sheets, there are 3 bullet points. And these are, you know, the signatures that follow are North End residents who are signing in support of these 3 bullet points. And they are that the plan is not equitable, that the plan would drive out existing residents, and the plan does not represent the community's full voice. And, you know, I'll just, so that everybody knows who I am and why I'm speaking on this. I'm the executive director of Church Community Housing Corporation, and we are the lead organization for the Health Equity Zone Housing Working Group. And so in that role, we've been working on these issues with the North End residents. And I think I'd just like to take this opportunity to try to really summarize what I think is driving the concerns of these residents. You know, I think, you know, personally, and, you know, this is my public opinion, I really like the North End urban plan. That, you know, the residents, you know, the members of the housing working group, there's a variety of opinions on the details of the plan. But, you know, I don't think the problem is so much with what the plan proposes, with as much as it is what the plan doesn't propose. And what I mean by that is that, you know, my background is in planning. When I look at this plan, I see best planning practices. You know, I'm a proponent of density. I want a mix of uses. I want walkability. I want a vibrant streetscape. I want, you know, a public transportation network. I really appreciate the plan on its planning merits. The problem arises when you propose this level of density and intensity of development adjacent to the neighborhoods that house the majority of the low and moderate income and minority residents in the city. If this plan were being proposed elsewhere, I don't think you would hear nearly as many concerns about equity or displacement, because if you can afford to have your property values increased, if you can afford to pay the increased property taxes that go along with increased density and increased intensity, it's good for you. If you decide to sell your house or sell your property, you're going to make more money on that sale because your property values have been increased by the change in uses directly adjacent to your property. But the problem arises when you're proposing this level of density directly adjacent to low and moderate income and minority neighborhoods without having adequate protections to prevent displacement. And that's where the plan falls down, is that this plan doesn't come anywhere close to providing robust recommendations for mechanisms that will prevent displacement of the existing residents in the North End communities. And so that's why you see these residents communicating their concerns about being forced out of Newport, a city that they love, and their particular community in the North End, where where they live, where they have their support systems, where their friends and family are. They are genuinely concerned about being driven out of the neighborhood and city where they live and where they want to continue to reside. And I think that I've seen reference to impact fees, and I want to make the distinction that the Housing Working Group has never proposed impact fees. Impact fees discourage development. What we proposed is that a separate dedicated account be set up so that when the higher density development happens and there are increased property tax revenues as a result of that, that some percentage of those property taxes go into that account, and that account is then there to benefit the North End community to offset increased property taxes for people that can't afford to pay higher property taxes. That account is there to pay for community improvements that would benefit those community residents. And it's an important distinction that this is not being paid by the developers. It would be taken out of property tax revenue so that the developers aren't discouraged from making those investments, but that the community is still protected from the displacement that development is very likely to produce.
Okay, thank you. Peter, did you prepare the response to this? Peter?
What do you mean by response?
Oh, when we prepared the equity language, was it in response to the 3 points in this letter?
So this letter came in today. There have been 2 other letters from the Health Equity Zone submitted to the Planning Board. I believe one of them was from the Green and Urban Spaces Working Group, and I believe another was a joint letter between the Housing Working Group and the Green and Urban Spaces Working Group. Director Reynolds led the development of the new text for page 105.
Okay, so have we discussed any of those 3 points in any of our answers that'll be posted?
So the 3 points listed in the letter?
Yes. It's hard to put you on the spot. I mean, if this does put you on the spot, then maybe we should.
No, I mean, I don't know that there needs to be a back and forth between Christian and the staff. I think the staff, and I don't want to speak for Trish, but I think the staff's position is that the plan is doing the types of things that the Health Equity Zone is asking for. And there are specific policy requests from the Health Equity Zone that under the Newport charter system, staff believe that power rests with the City Council. And the City Council has the ability to take up any issues they so desire.
Okay, so I guess what I'd like to say is that in response to this letter, maybe Christian could speak with staff to discuss the 3 specific points that he's talking about, and for you to just articulate staff position. And then they'll deliver that to the board so that we can consider it. Okay? And so for the record, we will accept the letter. Thank you. So is that it for letters then?
Yes.
Okay, so far? Okay, so now what I'd like to actually finally do at 7:59 is open up to public comment. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. State your name and address for the record, and please be brief. Please be courteous and respectful. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? And I'm looking in the sidebar here to see the raised hands.
We have Ross Can, Madam Chair.
I see. Oh, okay.
I already promoted him. I apologize.
Okay, yeah. Let's have Ross speak first.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for taking my question, and thank you all for your hard work on this very, very important plan, because this is really the thing that's going to drive development and prosperity in Newport for the next 30, 40, 50 years. My question is and I am also a fan of form-based zoning, but it's a very complex process with a lot of interlinking parts. And if you take away one part, the other parts don't seem to work as well. My question is, how do we implement a form-based plan where we haven't done one before, and keep all of the parts and pieces together in such a way that the plan doesn't fail because we pulled out a key linchpin that people weren't necessarily aware was a linchpin?
So it's a really good question. And just for clarification, right now, the form-based code will not be adopted as zoning. It will function as guidance. And we will adopt new zoning that is just more typical of Rhode Island zoning and is more consistent with state enabling law. And through the use of the guidance, we will begin to learn how to actually implement this as zoning. Trish, would you like to build on that? Patricia?
Yep. No, sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That's true. We also are really excited about the potential of the form-based code and the things that it can accomplish, particularly in the North End and then in other areas throughout the city in the future. Right now, it's on a learning curve, and we are going to be using it as design guidelines, and we will be reviewing it as part of overall projects, working with developers to implement first, as Colin went through the sort of process and the layering of blocks, streets, frontages, and make sure all of those things are addressed, as well as all of the basic setbacks and frontage requirements. So we feel confident that we can address all of those really important building blocks, and we can incorporate all of the pieces that are necessary as part of the development, and have that also mesh with a more traditional style zoning to begin with, so the developers are more familiar with that and able to start the process.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that the staff really believes that this is right for the future, but that because of Rhode Island law and present practices and historic practices, it's going to be a process to get it to work. But go on, Ross, please. Did you have more to say?
No, I just wanted to thank you for that clarification, and using it as design guidelines seems to be a sensible way to at least introduce the concept more widely to the point where it could actually be implemented both procedurally and functionally in a good way. So thank you for that.
Good, thanks. Anything else? Okay, next let's have Barry Freeman.
Oh, sorry, I'm jumping the gun here. I promoted Rex.
I'm sorry. Okay, I see. We can do Rex, then Barry. Hi.
Hello. Rex LeBeau, they, them pronouns, 118 Ruckles Avenue. Yeah, thanks for answering the displacement question. And I was wondering if there might also be an addition to that, such as measuring it. Like, can the city start to measure displacement? That way you know whether or not those methods outlined in the response to how the plan would prevent displacement, like measure it, that way you know that if that's actually working. You probably have to start measuring now, and I don't know how you do that.
So Trish, can you speak to this?
I think that's an interesting idea, and I think it's a good idea. We could start to categorize. We know the amount of housing units there, the amount that are actually affordable, and I think keeping track of that will give us, particularly starting now, would give us a good baseline to sort of measure development in the future. And I think that's something that would be a responsible thing for the planning department to do anyway regarding affordable housing units.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thanks. Okay, so next, Barry.
Hi, can you hear me? Am I?
Yes.
I actually have 4 quick points if I can. Let me just get my video. There we go. Hi. The first, I'm also revisiting the mitigating displacement. I think it can't be overstated. So I'd like to just make an additional comment. At the last meeting, the exchange with the public question actually from Rex regarding mitigating displacement, the reply from a planning board member referenced that 16% affordable housing in Newport compared to the 10% mandate, and Middletown and Portsmouth needing to step up. That's certainly something I've heard before from counselors and planning board members. And, you know, my concern is that future planning in Middletown and Portsmouth is one thing, but the suggestion of moving people, disrupting a community is quite another. And planning has the opportunity to reassure protecting the integrity of our existing community and where people live and where they want to continue to live. So please continue to take any opportunity to reassure the community that that's not the intention and that that in fact won't happen. The second, Amendment 3 addressed Admiral Kalfas, which is really important. Admiral Kalfas west of Girard is not in the Pell Bridge project limits. And we're hanging our hat a lot on what the project limits are and what we know is going to be accomplished by RIDOT. The urgency of addressing traffic calming and connection, specifically multiple opportunities for people to get across Admiral Kalfas is really primary, you know, for the safety of the schools and the parks and the connection with the rest of the city.
I just interrupt and say those are priorities in the open space plan and the comprehensive plan. I mean, these priorities are persistent. We are aware of them, and it was really easy to write that amendment because, you know, it's utmost.
Right, and the amendment specifically calls out noise and pollution. You know, the multiple crossings is very important. There was a very interesting analogy made to the North End compared to, you know, the rest of the neighborhoods around the city. And somebody said, how many ways do you have to get out of your neighborhood? And of course there are multiple because, you know, in a gridded neighborhood, you know, you can go left, right. And out of the North End, you know, there's like one exit, you know, and creating multiple ways for people to move across Admiral Kalfas is the big connection for the city. Thank you for raising that or for pointing that out, Kim. The third is on the connectivity. In the plan, the connectivity in the plan references transportation, social and economic connectivity. And for transportation, these are direct planning outcomes such as crosswalks, bike paths, bus routes, and bus schedules. They need to be detailed in the plans rather than referenced in order to make them real. There are lots of good connections detailed in the plan, and then there are some gaps. So again, we need to make multiple exits out of the neighborhood as exist in neighborhoods throughout the city. Also, checking off transportation connectivity does not check off social and economic connectivity. We have to be really careful about that. They're very different solutions. Transportation connectivity does address some social and economic issues, but not all. So don't check it off when we check off transportation, please. The fourth is the importance of the community benefits agreement is paramount. Again, Amendment 1 established a Northeast Community Benefits Committee, and that's a good step. If the community benefits agreement is a negotiating tool with developers, then this should be mandated. There should be mandated community seats at that negotiating table that gets codified into city policy or ordinance. We have to be careful not to base the community benefit agreement components in this particular plan on feedback that was collected during COVID, because that was compromised. So we need more input and best practices to ensure being comprehensive in this plan. And we need to make sure that community members at community benefit discussions is codified, not just recommended.
Thank you. If you have that written, can you please submit it?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Phyllis. Are you done, Barry? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Phyllis, please.
Hi, my name is Phyllis Mulligan. I live in 200 Park Home in Newport, Rhode Island. And my question is, how can we as residents ensure that there is a place for us to have housing, particularly rent control, and opportunities for residents-driven businesses within the North End development? How can we go about getting in on committees or anything like that? What can I do?
Trish, can you speak to this?
I think your community, Phyllis, thanks for the question. That's a great one. I think it's always good to be involved, and you're doing that right now. It's important to be at the table when conversations are had and when discussions happening. And it's really important to always be part of the public process. The North End plan recognizes and the North End, the comprehensive plan in general, recognizes the importance of community input. And so we recommend that you do that at all times. And we will do always our best to keep the neighborhood informed about any important meetings that would need to be attended. And anytime that you have any questions in general, you can always contact the planning department. We're always available to answer any questions about projects that have come in. And anything that comes up, we would be happy to help with.
So thank you, Trish. For anybody in the audience that can answer this, I can't remember the particular name of the committee, but the Hes Greening Committee, is that open to the public? Does anybody know? Anybody that can answer this, please raise your hand. Alex, can you, is that you? No. Rex, can you answer this? Peter, will you let Rex in?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, so the HES's greening, all of our working groups are open to HES residents. And what I mean by HES is the health equity zones. So that would be the North End and West Broadway neighborhoods. So anyone who's a resident of those neighborhoods is welcome to join our working groups. And the Greening Urban Spaces working group and the housing working group, you've already heard mentioned on this call, are the two that are most deeply involved in the North End urban plan, but our transportation working group is involved as well.
Thank you.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, and Phyllis, are you a member of any of these committees?
Oh, Phyllis is a rock star.
Okay, so since Phyllis is already involved, maybe the challenge is not to get more involved, but to find a channel of communication between these groups and city action. So that's one thing to consider.
Well, I want to know if I saw different zoning things that they were doing, and I was hoping that we could have a residential building that we could have housing and job opportunities in there within the plan. And I want to go beyond what our groups is doing and think about different things that are bigger so that we can make sure that people don't leave Newport and get priced out. And that's the biggest problem here, is a lot of our young people are leaving because they don't have housing that they can afford. And affordable housing is not good. It causes so many problems. It causes cliff effects. I mean, it's okay. I live in affordable housing, I live in Park Home. But once you make a certain amount of money, you can't live there anymore. And there's nowhere in Newport that we can afford to live. So within this neighborhood plan, I was hoping that we could get some kind of residential in there that it was sort of like New York used to do when they did not affordable, but rent control. Yeah, so that the residents wouldn't leave, when they would be able to stay there.
So our staff is very familiar with the cliff effect, and they have thoughts on this. And if you want, you can contact Peter Friedrich and he can have a discussion with you about this.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, next is Daniel. Hi, Dan.
This is actually Sean O'Connor. I'm using my husband's account.
Hi, Sean.
2 Tyler Street in Newport. And I had a question about the plan, and I'm imagining it'll be easily answered. It's about the, there's a section that starts on page 102. It's called Development Actions. And in it, on page 104, it's talking about, there's a section, it's talking about the city of Newport's goals for reducing, in support of Newport's goals for reducing greenhouse gases. Projects should analyze passive and active strategies, and it goes on. And then in the column next to that, it's talking about that all development within the study area should strongly consider adhering to one of the relevant established building rating systems, for example, LEED ND and LEED Gold. So my question is, when I read that language, I read a lot of, shoulds, should consider this, or should, study greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around the process of how that looks in practice. Are those things that become like musts, and as the planning board is reviewing development proposals, they're going to have to do those things, or is it more at the discretion of the planning board? How does that work?
So I think discretion is the right word, and that's why should is there. The idea is that the plan it's both a graphic and a narrative format, and that shalls are really part of the regulatory process. So this is a sort of philosophical addendum to the regulatory process, and it guides the way the boards should interface with developers as they present their proposals. So that's one way to sort of think about it philosophically, but then maybe Trish could talk a little bit more about the specifics of how the recommendations how the recommendations get more teeth.
Thank you.
So thank you, Madam Chair. We start basically with our 2017 comprehensive plan, which is our overarching guiding document. And then it's further expanded with the information that we have here, specifically within these 5 themes, and this is regarding resiliency. So it talks about the things that are important, those 5 character themes: opportunity, connectivity, resiliency, equity, and quality. And so when we have any projects that come in within that area, we are going to look at them all in terms of opportunity, equity, quality. And this will be coming up as part of the review. We'll be taking a look at this section specifically for these aspects in any plan. And we will be supporting all of these initiatives that are in this plan in the development. The difference between, we should look at all of these, and we will as part of the review process. To mandate every single requirement that comes through as a development would be onerous and maybe not possible. But we look at within this document of the development actions, what is possible and what should be and what we can make happen. So it's a really important tool for us to get, where we need to be. The zoning ordinance that's incorporated and becomes sort of the next generation of this and how we enact it, that will talk in terms of shall. So the important pieces that we must have as a community will be taken out and will be written in shall language, and that will be part of the zoning ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Sean?
Let's see one. Okay, well, in that same spirit of sort of like the philosophical language of the plan, a little bit later on page 106, there's the infrastructure action section, and on the following page 107, it's talking, it's in this subsection about coordinating with governmental agencies and area institutions to better prepare for climate change. And there's a passage on the identification and facilitation of temporary and/or permanent renewable energy facilities. So that, I'm guessing that's sort of a similar type of statement. It's not necessarily a should statement. It seemed more of like a aspirational if opportunities present themselves for that. Is that the best way to read that statement, or is there a better way to read it?
No, I actually think that's aspirational is exactly it. And I think that a lot of the language is aspirational. And I think the idea is that it's to alert board members of the aspiration so that when the opportunity arises, we seize it. And maybe Trish, you can add to that.
I think that was really well said. I think, when you use that along together with the map that talks about resiliency, and I think in that map, they actually highlight areas that would be good for renewable opportunities. So between the goal of incorporating this and this map that shows us different opportunities in different places where we could actually have renewable energy sites, we hope to get sort of, the maximum quality development out there that we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it for me. No.
Thanks. So I see that Phyllis has her hand up again, but before we give her another chance to speak, is there anybody else in the public that wishes to comment?
There is no.
Natalie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Natalie Harris, and I live at 85 Hillside, which is in the North End. And I just want to make it clear to everyone that I understand that the development and there's things that that need to be followed, and there's rules and regulations that need to be followed. But I just want to reiterate that this is a neighborhood that a lot of children live in and a lot of parents and families live in, and we don't want to get displaced. And we should have say in what goes on in our neighborhood. So anybody that is on here from the North End that is speaking, we are speaking from experience, and we are, we do want the best for our neighborhoods. We don't want to be displaced. We don't want to be not heard when it comes to our voice. So I just want to just reiterate that and just make sure that everyone knows on this planning board that we are people, and you're just not planning, something that is for the city. This is a neighborhood that I've lived here my whole entire life. So I just want to let you guys know that and just reiterate that fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Where do you live?
85 Hillside Avenue.
Okay. I think that Phyllis's, the exchange between Phyllis and Patricia was fruitful in that we talked about at least beginning to document the situation so that we understand who lives where and who's vulnerable. I think that's a great start. And I think we recognize that there are people that are vulnerable to displacement, and it's something we will certainly consider. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. And then Phyllis.
I'm sorry, I was trying to lower my hand, so I didn't want to speak again, so I apologize.
Okay. So next is, thank you, Jen. Jen?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute. I didn't realize that. So I'm sorry, it's me again, Jennifer Jackson, 38 Dudley Ave, North End. Like Nat said, we're people here, and our voices tend to not be heard as well as other voices, and we're just scared. A lot of us are scared, and we don't want you to think that we're not watching, we're not understanding. We get it, but a lot of times we've been promised so many things to be done with our neighborhoods, with our housing security, and they have not gone through the way they should. Like even when Tammany Hill was redone with Newport Heights, there was people that were promised they could come back, and they weren't able to come back. So our community is very scared with the being able to feel safe, that your house is going to be there. Yes, this is down the road, and there's a lot of changes coming, but we weren't heard at any of the meetings. Even when they came to the NENA meetings, we were not heard what we thought that would help benefit the North End residents. And I think that it shows with what has been chosen as most of the zoning issues, or I know you guys didn't, but the city council said we want to see ABC in this area. And a lot of it, again, was not heard from the North End residents. And I'm also part of the housing group too. I do a lot of things, but so like I said, when I say we, I talk to a lot of people. I'm involved in a lot of different organizations, and I hear my community, and we're just trying to be heard. And I appreciate everything you guys do, because planning is a crazy aspect, and I appreciate everything. Thank you.
So I can't remember if I asked you before, but where do you live again?
38 Dudley Ave.
38
It's
Dudley.
off the hillside. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's good to know you are absolutely in our thoughts.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Okay, so is there anybody else that wishes to speak to this?
Madam Chair, I think Daniel Cano had his hand raised at one point.
Yeah, I don't see him anymore. I think he's
He's
gone.
here as a panelist.
No, he's
Oh,
not.
that was confusing because that was Sean.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it's
yeah,
Sean.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll put
Sorry,
you
I'm
back
sorry,
as a,
Sean. I forgot.
No worries.
an attendee. I forgot to demote you. I apologize.
But now we have Dylan. Dylan?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, great, thanks, sorry. My question had to do, been trying to catch up on exactly where the project was, and when I was going over the various plans, there was different alternatives. And for where I live which is 81 Garfield Street, I live really, really close to the highway as it is on the one side of me. And when I saw some of the alternative plans, like that one of them was going as the highway.
Can I just interrupt you? Are
Yeah.
you talking about the ramp realignment plans?
Yeah, that's a different project, huh?
Yeah. So we are working with the one plan that they have supplied as the preferred plan. It's a state-run project by RIDOT, so we don't decide that. The state decides it, and then we work around it.
Madam Chair, Mr. Friedrichs, can you point Dylan to the website? Where should he look up to find more information on the bridge realignment? Where's an easy source for that?
So there's a RIDOT project website for that.
That's probably the one that I've been looking at.
So before before the project was approved, it was pellbridge-ea.com. But now that the project is approved, it's migrated to the actual RIDOT website.
Okay.
And let me share my screen. I'm hoping you can see this, Dylan. But I just did a Google search for RIDOT projects.
Okay.
And it's dot.ri.gov/projects. There was a link sent out in one of the Mayor Bova's recent emails to the actual project. And maybe it might be this page. There's not a lot of information here. But they had posted the presentation they gave on the 26th on the project website. So I don't know why I can't view it here, but all this information unfortunately is old.
Peter, I think there's a link to that video on the city's website also.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. It had all those different alternatives and whatnot there. I didn't know if there was one that was settled on.
Well, this one, let's see. Okay, so it has its own website. It's dot.ri.gov/projects/Pell Bridge ramps.
Okay.
And this is the video from the 26th, and then right below the video is the actual slideshow. So there's only one alternative now. I think it was 4A is the one they chose.
Okay.
And they're probably around 50% through design right now. And they'll wrap up design this fall, and the city will review the design and comment on it before it goes out to bid.
So that one, yeah, that's probably the one that's gonna probably. I'm curious to see exactly what it would be for where I live, because as it is, it seems like it would kind of go right through the undeveloped land in the back and just kind of wrap.
Yeah,
right around.
they're taking 3 houses, or 2 houses and some vacant land on Garfield Street.
I think the 2 houses are on Halsey, Peter.
Or the one street west.
Yeah, the one that's going north-south.
So you can almost zoom in where
This is, yeah, the east-west is Garfield, north-south is Halsey, and you can see the 2 houses they're taking.
Oh, right here, you're right.
Yep, the brown one to the left just sold a week ago.
that's Halsey Street, right?
Sure, yep.
So that's interesting. So how high does that look, that ramp?
Well, it's not changing from what exists.
Oh.
So the bridge is staying, and then they're gonna, there's that clover here. They're gonna grade it out to the east and to the north, wider than that clover.
It's expected to hit grade just about where that east-west connector is. So it comes down to grade at that point.
So, this design's a little out of date, but if you look at this drawing they made last year, this is the one. You can kind of see the old clover. They're just kind of grading it out to the east. But it'll be the same height as that clover pretty much. It's not too high at that point.
Okay, so it does though. It goes right through that undeveloped land, right? That is behind me.
Well, there's the Service Master facility here, or that cleaning company, that's going.
Okay.
So, Dylan,
Yeah.
do you have a question about our plan as it relates to the ramp realignment plan?
Well, I guess it's really, my question has more to do with the ramp realignment, but just because that's really, the concern for me is my whole backyard is going to be different. The noise is going to be louder. I'm just concerned about those rather personal problems, but of my lot, of where I just happen to be. Yeah, there you see. That's me right here. Yep, right there in that corner. On the bottom of Garfield. Yeah, you see my yard and all that. That's really.
Are you here at the end?
Yeah, that's me.
Well, they should be communicating with you about any land that they might be taking.
Well, they haven't, so it might be very close, but that just means it's going to be so close, it's ridiculous.
Peter, can you maybe help Dylan with contact information at the state so that he can contact the right people?
Yep.
Okay.
You can see how close it is,
Yeah,
right?
no, it looks like maybe your yard is bigger than your actual land.
Yeah.
But we can connect you to the DOT project manager and tell you a little bit about the real estate process with DOT.
So, if that is, even there, that it's just, they're allowed to just abut right through my the back.
So we are not we really can't be speaking about this because it's not our purview. So you have to speak with DOT, and Peter's going to give you their information.
Okay.
You know what I mean when I say it's not our purview? We're not in charge of that, so we would be overstepping our boundaries.
Yes. Is there any kind of options for me? As far as if it really seems to.
Yeah, you would want to hire a lawyer. Yeah, you would want to hire a lawyer.
Yeah. Okay.
And Dylan, if you want to stay in your spot, there are things that you can ask for, sound protection and landscaping and things like that. So you should contact DOT.
Okay.
I wish we could help you more.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sorry. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Is there anybody else on the, that has a question or a comment? Okay. So what I'd like to do, I'm sorry?
Jean Reisman had raised her hand at one point. I didn't know if she wanted to say anything.
Okay, I don't see the hands up. So we're moving on. The next thing I'd like to do is invite Trish to walk, wait a minute, did Trish already walk us through the amendments? She did. Oh, okay. So that's really it for tonight. I don't think we're gonna, I think it's too late to take up the amendments and to vote on it. What I'd like the board to do is familiarize yourself with the language so that we can begin to vote on it at the next meeting. The next meeting will allow limited public input for anybody that forgot, or didn't have a chance to say something tonight. But the function of the next meeting is essentially administrative. We are going to take up the amendments. We're going to take up the necessary changes to the comp plan so that we can put all this into motion, a kind of administrative housework, and then we're gonna form the recommendation. So the bulk of the next meeting is going to be to do all this like administrative house cleaning.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
So can we bring additional amendments to the future meeting?
If you have an idea, I want you to work with staff so that you can craft something that is in an actionable position. I don't want vague ideas. I want real language that we can vote.
Actual physical amendments that are actually.
Yes. Voting amendments, not vague ideas. And Peter and Trish are totally available to everybody to help you craft it so that it is, they can help you get it in a position where you can make your point and we can take it to a vote. They've been doing it for a month now and they're pretty good at it. So, anybody else? Does anybody anticipate submitting any amendments? Okay, so I suggest you talk to them quickly so that they can pull that together for the next meeting.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Paul.
I've had conversations with our city staff about some amendments and haven't been able to, and I don't see them formulated in the added amendments that were put on tonight.
Are you talking about Peter and Trish?
Correct.
Trish, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. We did meet with Paul, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood. I thought you were going to sort of start those and we were going to work on them together, or do you want us to start? It was primarily organizing the tables, right?
I think it was putting actionable items. I think we addressed that it needed to have language in there to be community focused, whether that came directly from language from the comp plan, but it needed to add some security to our community to address this displacement questions that's been addressed. And then further language that was when one of the amendments was already addressed for the CBA. I'm like I said, I think when we ended the conversation that I would be happy to put it together, but that wasn't, I thought it was coming from the direction of city staff. And so if I need to put it together, I'm more than happy to do it.
Yeah, I think
we can work on it together, Paul. It was just a miscommunication. I thought that you were working on it, and I guess you thought I was working on it. So yeah, I think let's work on it together.
Okay.
But I do think that for a process, I would ask the board members to take the first stab at it so that staff doesn't have to guess, but can at least try to figure out what you're saying. Okay. Anybody else have any comments? Melissa?
Just a quick procedural question. We'll hear the amendments at our next regular meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. At the November 18th meeting.
November 18th. I apologize.
6 p.m. November 18th. The next regular meeting is the annual meeting on December 7th.
Okay, 6 p.m. November.
And then we have the Waste Wharf hearing on the 16th.
Did you say November 7th, Peter? Isn't it
Melissa will
December
not be in
7th?
attendance.
No.
It's December 7th. I hope I didn't say November 7th.
Okay.
There's no meeting on Saturday.
6 p.m. November 18th. And then I just wanted to clarify. So is that still a public hearing or is it a special meeting? Okay.
Public hearing at a special meeting, and the board is required to allow public comment after it approves any amendments.
After we approve them or after we hear them for consideration?
If you deny them, you don't have to reopen public comment, but if you pass any amendments, you have to reopen public comment.
Thank you.
So essentially, the public hearing is still open. It was open before and it's open now. We've just been continuing it. Okay.
Yeah, you're only allowing public comment at certain times to maintain order.
Yeah.
You just committed to allowing public comment at the beginning of the meeting on the 18th, which is good in case people missed this evening.
Okay, Stephen? You gotta unmute Steve. I'm sorry, he had to unmute you or you?
Yeah, I did. Is tonight's public meeting closed to the public as far as comments and questions? Have you closed that?
No. What I was saying is that it was open, the public hearing has been open since the last meeting, but just to maintain order, I just select certain times when the public can weigh in.
Okay, thank you.
This is all a public hearing.
Gotcha.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, are we ready to adjourn till the next time? Good.
One question.
Yeah.
Could Kim and Peter hang around and Trish after the meeting, and I'm going to make a phone call to Peter?
Yes.
This has nothing to
figure
do.
that out.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the meeting. Okay.
Yeah, we can figure that out.
Okay.
Okay, do I stay on the Zoom?
Well, we can try staying on the Zoom. So, Madam Chair, we need a motion to continue the public hearing to 6 p.m. on November 18th.
Okay, so is there a motion to continue the public hearing to 6 p.m. November 18th?
So move. Second.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Will the secretary please record the vote?
Yes. Kim Salerno.
Aye.
Jeff Brooks.
Aye.
Stephen Berlucci.
Aye.
Elizabeth Fuerte.
Aye.
Richard Haggis.
Aye.
Paul Marshall.
Aye.
John Olivera.
Aye.
Melissa Patavina. Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you. And the meeting is now over. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Will the secretary please record the vote?
Salerno.
Aye.
Jeff Brooks.
Aye.
Stephen Berlucci.
Aye.
Elizabeth Fuerte.
Aye.
Richard Haggis.
Aye.
Paul Marshall.
Aye.
John Olivera.
Aye.
Melissa Patavina. Aye. The ayes have it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night. That was good. And we'll see you next time. All right. Take care.
So the important thing is that we get below a quorum.
Yeah.
Yeah, which 1, 2, 3, 4. We're below a quorum now.
It's just
So-
Peter and I mean, Stephen and I. Is Paul staying?
Do you want me to boot you, Paul? Okay. So there's some attendees on here. So Paul, if you want to talk in private, I can try and I'll remove them all.
Okay. Steve, you mean Steve?
All right. It's just going to take a minute.
Yeah, we'll just wait for them
All
to
right.
leave.
Peter?